Hello everybody, welcome to Nature's People. Thank you for tuning in. Well, today we're going to have a very interesting topic, which is why did the US bomb the home islands of Honshu and Kyushu in Japan, and more specifically in the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I'm going to brief it out and explain in a very detailed manner and explain what actually happened from the instance where there were tensions between both parties, which is the US and Japan, the Japanese Empire, that led to a final blow on the main cities in the south of Japan. So first and foremost, the American Empire was developed or was created by the Brits. As you all guys might know, the British Empire was really large. They were spanning all over the world. Was really excited by a triumph in the European colonialism that just sparked a lot of emerging social and structural societies all around the world. That sort of was an expansion, or the Europeans were trying to find more land to graze, to farm, to have resources, and to explore the world, basically, just like this place. For those of you guys who watch my videos and don't know where I'm situated, I'm in North America, but I'm not. My origins are not from North America, just like everybody else in here. Anyways, getting back to the point, what I wanted to say is the U.S. was really expanding back in the 19th century after its independence, so which resulted in the US wanting to have a lot of trading posts all around the world and expanding its economy and having partners all over the world, which resulted to the point wherein Americans actually wanted to dock in Japan after the creation of steam engines. So steam engines were basically used to power mainly trains, cargo, to transport cargo from a place to another, sort of displacement of materials and things that were really necessary to improve the quality of life of citizens back in that age. And then also for ships required a fuel that was sort of rudimentary back then, and well, it was coal basically, so they were using coal to power steam engines in ships, and they needed places to dock and to refuel. And a voyage, imagine, from the west coast of the US, say some port in California, all the way up to maybe a port city of Guangzhou, or say Hainan in China. It would really require the ship to be filled, and to refuel this type of ships, you cannot really have all this amount of coal in the ship, because that's going to put a strain in the cargo. Imagine back then people wanted to increase the efficiency. It was all about efficiency. It wasn't really about the products. So it was just occupying more space. Americans found a way of trying to dock in the Japanese islands. However, Japan was a really close country and they didn't want to deal with anybody. They were locked off. They had no connection with the outside world, and that really bothered Americans, because Americans, what they really wanted was just to do business. They didn't care about people who don't want to have interactions. So this is what Americans did. They tried to engage with the Japanese, but Japanese were just weird, and that didn't work. So they ended up bringing a whole fleet. Man, they brought a whole new fleet with many battleships right off the coast of the Japanese main islands, probably somewhere in Tokyo. And they're like, "You listen, Japan, it's either you open up or we're gonna blow the doop out of you. Like, we're going to destroy everything in here." So the Japanese had to reconsider. They had a lot of requirements and there are a lot of requisites following up to that moment. So the Japanese really evaluated the situation, and they were like, "All right, we'll let you Americans dock in here." So over the course of that point, looking forward, Americans really had technological transfer into Japan because the Japanese were just amazed by technology, by the Western standards, Western ways of viewing the world, Western ways of engaging technology, science, productivity, better life, quality of life, all these aspects. And the Japanese, just one thing, interesting thing about the Japanese guys. The Japanese, when they do anything, they work on perfection. The West and the rest of the world, it's all about getting the thing to the point that satisfies the human being. But the Japanese are way beyond that point. They're beyond satisfaction. They are like, if something makes you happy, another thing will make you joyful or ecstatic. It's just to that other level. So that's what the Japanese were really good at. They're just good at perfecting stuff. So eventually they ended up doing better than Americans. So as the time went by, the Japanese were really amazed by the fact that having more territory means more resources, means more land, means more power, and the Japanese were just sort of angered by the fact that a lot of Westerners had a lot of demands, and they had a lot of authoritarian superiority complex, and they didn't want to put up with that. For those of you guys who have never been to Japan, I've been there. So one thing that you can tell from that society is that they're really hard people to understand as far as superiority complexes is concerned. So it's you might as well just try to think that things work differently out there. So basically, the Japanese didn't want to put up with that. They just went beyond. So they started getting off the work. They started going to these places in China. There's a region called Manchuria. It's also called Manchukuo in Japanese. The Japanese were just raiding that place, destroying it. They built up a new type of flyer plane. It was called the Zero. Amazing plane. They enacted new technologies to make it very efficient, very powerful. They were just flying all over China, and they took a lot of territory in China, and that just made things so difficult for the West, because the West was afraid of Japan, because the Japanese were expanding so fast at a really rapid pace. They were not steady. They were just abrupt. They were doing things in an exponential scale. So they started going all over Southeast Asia. They took down the Philippines. They took Indonesia. They took Burma. They took literally everything down there. Indonesia, Malaysia, Taiwan, South Korea. They annexed the Korean Peninsula in 1910. So all these basic things were really stressing the Americans, because the Americans, though they were really into business, they didn't like the fact that people were doing war crimes on others, killing just for territory, or were being ruthless. And for human rights violations, they placed an embargo on the Japanese oil industry. So because America was the sole controller of oil extraction, production, and processing and refinery, America just placed an embargo, and Japan couldn't have oil no more. And the Japanese was like, oh really? So all right, we're going to devise a plan that is going to blow Americans big time, and we're going to bring them to the negotiating table, and they'll have to succumb to our demands. That's how it works. We are the Japanese. And that just led up to a point where the Americans saw themselves chased off their main territory in Southeast Asia, which was the Philippines. Just mentioned a couple of minutes ago that the Philippines was taken by the Japanese. And then what happened following to that is that the Japanese were just going, their drive to this thing just went so rampant that they decided to attack a territory of the Americas, the American Federation, which is Hawaii. For those of you guys who do not know, Hawaii is formerly a U.S. state. Though it's the westmost state in the U.S., though it's not in the contiguous U.S., it is a U.S. state, one of the 50 U.S. states. And there they just went way beyond. The Americans were like, we're not going to put up with this. They declared war on Japan, and then that just followed up. I'm trying to be as brief as much with this point in the video, but what I was basically tell you guys is that what ended up happening is that this war was just putting so much stress on the American financial system and military complex that there was so much production of aircraft carriers. One of them was the P-29. It was so much production that Americans were building 1,000. For those of you guys who do not know what a B-29 plane is, you can Google it up. It's a carrier, really huge plane. It has the dimensions of today's Boeing 7 Max 747. So it's a really huge plane. They're building such as that plane. I'll just zoom it out for you guys. Talking about planes, that is one of them. So they were building so many planes that they were just stressing the war efforts that the Germans and the Japanese was trying to, you know, sort of stress the American military complex to a halt. They were not successful. So this just led to a point wherein the Americans were really strained by the fact that there was a war in Europe and in the Pacific. So luckily, I would rather say, the Germans lost the war in Europe in 1944, and Americans now could entirely focus on the Pacific, which was Japan. However, here's the thing. One interesting topic, or point I would rather say, why do the Americans drop Little Boy and Fat Man in the home islands? You guys really know very well how powerful are these bombs. They're just not easy to deal with, because the cascade of effects and the broad array of things they affect is just so profound. They don't just kill people, they kill generations, they kill the future, they destroy the soil, they destroy the processes. They're just a threat to the living systems of Earth. So it's just super dangerous. So for Americans, because they built these things, they knew what they were doing. And one thing that happened is that through the war efforts that were ongoing, they had a lot of amphibious assaults in the islands adjacent to the home islands of Kyushu, which was Okinawa. For those of you who are interested, just go Google up like the Battle of Okinawa. If not mistaken, it probably might have taken up to 2 or 3 months just to eradicate all single soldiers. It was just so really difficult because the Japanese had a sort of different culture and understanding of the war compared to the Germans. Remember, the Germans are Europeans, and Europeans and Americans back then, they had a sort of cultural connection. They had habitual contexts. However, with Asians, which are Japanese, they are further different type of different people, because the Japanese believed that war wasn't a war of just nationalism. It was about their family, it was about to protect their bloodline, it was about their pride, it's about their uniqueness. A lot of factors are engaged. So what used to happen is that the Japanese wouldn't surrender. They would just say, you know what, I will just die trying to eliminate this plague that is trying to destroy our homeland. So because of these small attitudes, Americans really brought to the table 3 final conclusions that this war had to be finished, and there are 2 ways that Americans were planning for this. I'm really giving you guys really good content. I know it's not a right way of doing it because I'm just showing a park and talking. Maybe I should bring some images. Please bear with me, guys. I'm working on that. And if you stay till this point in the video, thank you so much. A lot of talking. Let me continue. Please keep watching my videos. I'll really bring good content. Really curiosity videos are incoming. So what happened is that the Japanese, the Americans just brought 3 points of the of conclusions where, well, they say really we cannot keep on stressing our military complex to this extent. What we'll do, we'll put 3 points, 3 possibilities. One is to encircle the whole Japanese islands from the south in Kyushu till the north in Hokkaido, and then we'll just make sure that they don't have access to foreign trade, the economical system. They'll just be isolated, and maybe they'll just give in to the American demands, and maybe one day. And that was the first point, the first possibility. And then the second option they gave the Japanese was to actually invade the main islands. That would be the most amphibious and the most profound war that mankind would have seen, because back then, if I'm not mistaken, the home islands of Japan had probably around 60 million inhabitants, and Americans were planning to assign 3 to 4 million soldiers to eradicate one by one single Japanese in the home island. It's just so terrifying what happened in that war, in the Second World War II. I'm actually getting goosebumps just by speaking about this. It's just so profound. Like, imagine a country of 60 million people and you're contemplating eliminating a single one of them just because of whatever. But I don't want to get political. Anyways, so well, the last option was to expedite this process, and they had a way of expediting it, which is, well, you guessed it, was actually to take those 2 beasts and launch them in the home islands. Well, as you all guys know, the Japanese were not people of surrendering, and the reason they surrendered is that Americans chose the third option, which is to expedite the process and take Little Boy and Fat Man and dropping it in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and making the Japanese actually coming to the final table and getting the unconditional surrender and surrendering to American demands. And they had a subsequent occupation of the home islands. Well, why did they surrender? Because there are a lot of nuclear engineers in Japan that made an assessment of what happened. And the Japanese, because the Germans were the ones that first discovered fission, which is the breakdown of atoms into smaller parts and the release of tremendous amounts of energy through the Einstein's equation, E is equal to E mc square. Well, the Japanese knew about these concepts, and but however, they didn't know how devastating and how profound were the subsequent consequences of that bomb. Because when they went to do the mapping and the cartography of the place, they saw that just created a crater in the soil, and then people were sick. They were having DNA damage. The radiation was still there, and it was a process. They were evaluating the half-life of that. The decaying of the radioactive effect would take decades. So there are a lot of aspects to consider, and not knowing, the Japanese did not know how many bombs did the Americans have. So the engineers actually just recommended to the emperor back then that he might as well just give up, because it was a risk to their race, to their home, to their nation. Sorry. So that's how it happened, guys. That's why the Americans bombed Japan. Thank you so much for watching. I know the content doesn't look good, but that's gonna get solved pretty soon. Stay tuned. Videos every day. We're working on enlightening you guys and enlightening myself. Stay tuned, share, subscribe. Thank you. Nature's people together.